the way we can make it better is to put the dynamic component into a separate directive. So the directive gets the selector, SSO dynamic component, and as an input, we hand it over data on how the dynamic component should be rendered. So in this particular case, if I'm going to look into the dynamic component, you can see that we hand over the component type and we hand over an object, two objects, inputs and outputs. And those contain the values that go in and out of the component. The place we use that inside our application, for that I have created a module 1. And module 1 has a start page. And if I look at the start page, now at the place we want to use the dynamic component, I can create this SSO dynamic tag. And I hand it over a dynamic component that I want to give in. So this dynamic component that I'm handing over, loads a module 1 loaded component. That one is in here. And the second one we can ignore for the moment. So it hands over this dynamic component inside. And we also have the old way to directly load the statically loaded way for components inside the template. So those should actually be similar. So if I head over to my browser onto the correct page, I can see that it's sort of this is the content, module 1 loaded, and also the module 1 loaded. So one is dynamically loaded and one is statically loaded. And with this, I don't have to write the complex code from the directive every time inside my component, but I have a simple way to use it. Now, there's this red line here on top, and it tells me that the selector should be used as an attribute. There's a thing. The way we are using this, we're sort of both a component and we're also a directive. So what's the difference between a component and a directive? A directive is a component but without a template, and that is true. But also a directive usually would be something that we sort of add as a parameter behind. So as an example, I could sort of create a div and then hand this over as a parameter to that particular div. That's the way that the directive is actually used. So the way we are using this directive, the SSO dynamic component directive, is sort of a mixture between both. And the linter has its particular issues with it, but as long as it's stored away in a separate project, which I have over here, I personally think that's completely fine. You just have to be aware that if you have a project like this, that your build step for this particular project leaves away the linter or certain checks within the dynamic component. It's a reason why it's fairly small up here. So I guess that's the important part.